Her name was Maire. She was only 16 years old. She wasn't taken for a crime. She wasn't taken in war. She was taken for something far more ordinary and far more sinister. She was taken for being poor. The year is 1675. Imagine a small village in Ireland, wrapped in mist and cold. Hunger is a constant, unwelcome guest, stalking the cobblestone lanes like a silent predator. For Maire, this hunger was more than just a ghost. It was a thief. It had stolen her parents, leaving her utterly alone in a world that had no place for a girl with nothing. No land, no protection, no future. In the eyes of the law and the powerful, she had become invisible, a problem to be solved. That's when the men came. They weren't soldiers, not in the traditional sense. They were agents of a new kind of commerce, one that dealt in human lives. They found Maire huddled in the shell of what was once her home. They didn't speak of chains or servitude. They spoke of opportunity. They told her she was being relocated for work. A new start, they promised. A chance to earn a life across the sea. 7 years of labor. They said, a contract. And then she would be free with a small piece of land to call her own, in a world that had offered her nothing but emptiness. This sliver of a promise felt like the sun breaking through the clouds. She believed them. How could she not? Before the sun had even touched the horizon, Maire was dragged from the remnants of her life. There was no trial to determine her fate. No chance to say goodbye to the graves of her parents. There was no choice. Her hands were bound. The chains were not brutally tight, not enough to draw blood or leave deep marks that would damage the property. They were just tight enough to serve as a constant, cold reminder of who was now in control, who owned her. Standing on the docks, watching the grey Irish coastline recede, Maire held on to the promise. She imagined America, a vast land of forests and new beginnings she had heard whispered about in stories. But the ship's compass told a different story. The vessel didn't turn west. It pointed south, slicing through the violent, churning waters of the Atlantic, on a course toward the heat, the sweat, and the unimaginable wealth of the Sugar Islands, toward the Bahamas. The journey below deck was a descent into a living nightmare. The air was a thick, suffocating blend of sea salt, sweat, and a palpable, choking fear. Dozens of girls and young women, all with stories like Maire's, were packed shoulder to shoulder in the darkness. The ship groaned around them, a wooden monster carrying its human cargo to an unknown doom. Some cried silently into their sleeves. Some murmured desperate prayers to a god who seemed to have abandoned them. And some, their spirits already broken, retreated into a silence so deep they never spoke again. On the official ship's manifest, they were not listed as slaves. They were indentured servants. It was a clean, legal term, a piece of paper that sanitized the brutal reality. But chains don't care what you call them. A cage is a cage, no matter how you paint the bars. The distinction was a lie, a cruel trick of language designed to soothe the consciences of the men who profited from this trade. The moment the ship docked in the blinding Bahamian sun, the lie evaporated. The heat was a physical blow, a suffocating blanket unlike anything she had ever known. The verdant, suffocating green of the sugarcane fields stretched to the horizon, a prison without walls. This wasn't a place of work, it was a place of ownership. Maire and all the others were no longer people. They were assets, listed in a ledger next to barrels of rum and tons of raw sugar. Life on the plantation was a relentless cycle of toil and terror. The sun never seemed to set on the fields, and the watchful eyes of the overseers never closed. Their authority was absolute, enforced with the casual brutality of a whip's crack. If you collapsed from exhaustion under the oppressive sun, you were beaten until you stood back up. If you dared to resist, to show even a flicker of defiance, you simply vanished. No one asked where you went. No one dared. The promise of 7 years became a ghost story. A faint, mocking whisper shared between the exhausted workers in the dead of night. It was a dream of a freedom they knew, deep down, they would likely never see. It was the whisper of a prisoner staring at a life sentence, dreaming of a pardon that will never come. In this crucible of suffering, Maire learned the harsh and simple rules of survival. Stay quiet. Stay quiet. Work until your bones ache. Never meet the overseer's gaze. And most importantly, remember who you are. Remember the green hills of Ireland, the face of your mother, the name your father gave you. Maire O'Donnell. She repeated it to herself in the dark. A secret mantra, a final act of defiance against a system designed to erase her very identity. Poverty had made her disposable. The contract had made her a number. But in her heart, she held on to her name. History has a way of forgetting its most inconvenient truths. Thousands of Irish men, women, and children like Maire were forcibly transported, their lives sold to the highest bidder. They weren't criminals, they weren't prisoners of war. Their only crime was poverty. A condition that, in the eyes of a merciless empire, made them less than human. Their stories were deliberately buried under legal jargon. Their suffering was renamed as opportunity. Their chains were rewritten as contracts. We may never know if Maire O'Donnell survived her 7 years. We may never know if she ever tasted freedom or felt the cool Irish rain on her skin again. The records are silent. It has traveled through the centuries, a testament to the resilience of a young girl who was stripped of everything but her name.